Well, again, thank you. Welcome to everybody welcome to another edition of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Systems for Action and Research Program in our Research in Progress webinar series. If you are new to this series or to the S4A program, welcome. S4A is a signature research program of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And in this program, we study innovative ways of helping medical, social, and public health systems work better together to address issues of health and health equity for American communities. We fund studies all around the U.S., looking at a whole variety of different ways of helping delivery and financing systems align their efforts and activities toward the goals of health equity. And in this webinar series, which comes to you a couple of times a month, we profile one of our research teams studying one of these innovative system alignment approaches, and it's a chance to hear in near real time how the study is going, what's being learned, and what lessons we might be able to draw broadly for the research community and for our colleagues and stakeholders working in policy and in practice and within communities. I'm Glenn Mays. I have the privilege of directing the National Program Office for the Systems for Action Research Program, and I'll be moderating our webinar today. You're in for a real treat because our research team featured in this edition of the webinar is a team you'll hear from very shortly, based at Texas A&M University, that has been studying approaches for addressing health and social needs of justice-involved young adults. Just a couple of words about logistics for today's webinar. All of our webinar attendees you're muted, so we can only hear from our panelists today. But we do want to hear from you as participants and from everybody else who's with us today on the webinar. In particular, we want to hear what questions you may have for this research team. We will have time devoted toward the end of the hour today to take questions, and we invite you to type in your questions using the Q&A box you should see down at the lower middle part of your Zoom screen. So at any time during the webinar, you've got a question, you want to hear more about something that has been mentioned, hit that Q&A box, type your question in. We'll get to as many of those questions as we can during the Q&A portion of today's webinar. We are recording this webinar, as we always do, and we will post a recording of today's webinar along with the slide set on the Systems for Action website for any folks who may not be able to join us live today, or if you just want to go back and hear something more that you heard about that was interesting today. So feel free to look on our website shortly after today's webinar for the recording and slides. We'll also email. I believe you also get an email link out to those materials as well if you've registered for today's webinar. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to our research team. I think we may have some introductory slides next for some of our presenters that you'll see and hear from, including Dr. Georges Nafal, who is Associate Research Scientist at the Public Policy Research Institute at Texas A&M University, also affiliated with the IZA Institute for Labor Economics. You can see the wealth of expertise and experience he has in this area. And I think I'm going to just go ahead and pass it over to Georges at this point to introduce the rest of our colleagues that we're going to hear from today.
Thank you, Glenn, and good morning, everyone. And we're very excited to be here and present an update on our research. So Emily Neiser will kick off the presentation, and then I'm going to come back and do a few slides in between. We do have two commentators today from who represent boots on the grounds with the program. Mark Ruiz, who will have some comments and answer some questions after our presentation, and Terrence Davis, who's going to join us halfway through the presentation. And when he joins us, we can introduce them. With that said, I'm going to give it to Emily, my colleague, who's going to lead the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, George. Thank you, Glenn, for the introductions. Very happy to be here today, and good morning to everyone. Today, we were just going to chat about kind of where we've come so far along the line on evaluating what's called the Transformative Justice Program in Williamson County. George and I are just two of the various researchers that we have on this project. You see we have some partners from the Harvard Law School and the University of Texas Health Science Center. And we are also very thankful to our program team in Williamson County who lead the Transformative Justice Program from day to day, especially the Judge Matthews and the District Attorney and Terrence, and our amazing case managers who are on the phone with us too today. Some context and how we got to this point. Criminal justice system, and if you've seen our presentations before, you've probably heard these same statistics over and over again. Even after repeating them multiple times, I still find them quite shocking, but the criminal justice system is failing emerging adults. And for us, that's the age range of 17 to 24-year-olds. In Texas, they make up only 11% of the population, but they're overrepresented in the criminal justice system, representing at least 29% of all arrests. And on top of that, this population tends to have kind of distinct health needs that often get ignored as part of the criminal justice system. So they're more likely to be have substance abuse issues. They're more likely to have co-occurring mental health disorders. They're also more likely to have emotional and physical trauma than their counterparts. And so what happens is when you get into the criminal justice system, a lot of those underlying factors are not necessarily addressed. They're more worried about the arrest and the felony and keeping the community safe. So these issues are not addressed, and the emerging adults just end up kind of sticking in the criminal justice cycle and recidivating and being rearrested over and over again and not solving some of those underlying issues. So one solution to that has been the brainchild of our Williamson County crew here, called the Transformative Justice Program. And it's meant to be a multidimensional intervention to not only kind of reduce this opportunity for staying in the criminal justice cycle, but also to try to address these underlying factors on the screen right here and really try to improve both the physical and mental health among other issues like housing, stability, and food and financial issues and education, all through this program. So when you enter into the TJ program, and this just kind of highlights some of the main points, if y'all have any more specifics about the program, again, we encourage you to ask our colleagues on the phone here. But immediately upon entering into the program, the participant receives a needs assessment to determine what are the factors that are contributing to these criminal behaviors. They will also receive a care plan to address those factors, and with the focus on connecting them to community-based services. This was an intentional choice kind of brought into the county early on, that they really wanted to take advantage of the services, the organizations, the care that is in their community to address these issues. They didn't want to create new services. They didn't want to have to hire a bunch of consultants that would only be around for the program, things like that. They wanted to really take advantage of the services available to them. They also have case management, which is led by the case managers, but is also supported by an entire team. And you'll hear me say over and over again that everyone that is involved in this program, whether it be the judge, the lawyers on both sides of the aisle, the program staff, the case managers, the service providers, are all very dedicated and committed to helping the individual participants succeed. And so therefore, even though it's led by the case managers, even though they do a significant portion of helping the participant through the program and addressing their needs, they also have some support behind them with all the other program stakeholders. And then finally, if the emerging adult completes the program, it usually runs about 18 months, and they transition through various phases where they will work on some of the more critical issues, pressing issues first, and then work to stability and growth by the end of the program. If they successfully complete all program requirements and graduate, they will also have their criminal record expunged. So that just gives you a little bit about the details. And what we did as a research team was we wanted to know, does this program kind of work? Does it compare to the criminal justice system and lead to better outcomes in terms of less likely to recidivate and better physical and mental health? We also wanted to kind of dive into what is driving the outcomes of the program. What features are necessary, how's the program changed over time, what's working, what's not working. And then finally, how is this program changing the community? And we talk about community in kind of two ways, both the geographical community of Williamson County and the population in it, but also the criminal justice community. So to answer these questions, we chose a mixed methods approach with a randomized controlled trial where any eligible defendants are kind of they're assessed and evaluated to determine if they would be eligible for the program, and they are randomized upon arrest. So they're assessed during or immediately after arrest, and then if they are potentially eligible, they are sent to the Williamson County team, who will then go talk to the defendant, encourage them to be a part of the potential study and take a chance at being randomized into the program, and they're randomly assessed at that point. Initially, we kind of planned to follow up for 2 years, and we were very focused again on these outcomes of health as measured with physical and mental health, and then also recidivism. We also asked some questions on some things like housing stability, food stability, to try to get at some of those social determinants of health outcomes too. Initially, when we kind of created this design, we were using what I would consider pre-COVID numbers and working off some of that data. So initially we expected about 12 enrollees per month, and we would have to recruit for about 12 months to get 144 total participants in our RCT, and being both control and treatment together to be able to measure the change that we were expecting to see. We'll talk about in a minute about what actually happened, but this was where we were trying to aim for. To complement the randomized controlled trial, we also added in a process evaluation, which was all about documenting the processes of how the program was operating kind of as they were doing it. And so we talked to all the stakeholders involved in implementing the program, but also the participants themselves and how they've been impacted by the program. We got to observe some court proceedings, we observed some meetings with the participants, and just kind of chat with them to understand their perspectives. So George is going to take over for a minute and kind of give you all the updates on where we're at on the RCT.
So we ended up launching on November 2nd, 2020, after several months of delays, which was, a combination of, logistics, factors, but also obviously the pandemic. And as Emily mentioned, based on power analysis, we were, and previous criminal justice data from Williamson County, we were expecting about 12 enrollees or 12 participants a month. And this graph basically shows the total participants over time, starting from November 2020 all the way to November 2022. And we'll give an update that we're still doing randomization. So if the first year catches your attention, I mean, so initially the S4A grant had 1 year of enrollment, and you could see that we really never crossed 5 participants, which is less than half what we were expecting. And that trend stayed for almost a year until basically September and October of 2021. Now, after that, we saw an uptake. So after October 2021, we did reach 10, never really reached 12. But we did have, and you can see the graph basically shows an increase in the number of participants. Now, so once we started, we launched, we immediately started with the main challenge, which is enrollment. And we worked with the team in Williamson County to make sure that we're doing our due diligence in terms of double checking eligibility, which is number of offenses, list of specific felony offenses, and so on. So and age, for example, eligibility. And we wanted to make sure that we are not missing on anyone, simply because previous pre-pandemic data suggested that we should have about 12 a month. The second a challenge that we faced was the survey completion rate. So we had a baseline survey, and then after that, every 3 months, we had about, on average 50% for the treatment and 30% for the control across all follow-ups. And, from our experience, it seems to, we had, some participants who always did the surveys, and they were very good at and making sure that, they did this, and others, it was hard to get them to do the survey beyond the baseline survey. And we did a lot of attempted solutions, such as reach out to them immediately after enrollment, kind of build a contact. So we had an additional email after enrollment, but also asked for additional contact. Now, at baseline, we did ask for 2 contact information, so we can reach them through their contact information. Then we added another organization, such as a club or a church or social club. So we tried to basically increase those survey completion. Now, to give you a quick update on some demographics, and this data, stops in spring of 2022. We're asking for a data download every quarter, and we just received the most updated one literally a week ago, but we were not able to incorporate this today. The average age in our population is about 20, and the gender distribution is about 76% male and 24% female, which matches what criminal justice, basically gender distribution. In terms of race, about 77% of our population of 62 is white and 22% are Black. And a quick note here, if you look at the demographics of the county has about 79% whites and less than 8% African American or Black. So this is very interesting, caught our attention in terms of those who are arrested are 3 times, more likely 3 times to be Black. But that again matches what criminal justice data across different counties show. And in terms of Hispanics, we have about 34% who are Hispanic. Now, in that case, all of them have at least 1 felony because that's part of the eligibility. But almost 90% of them have more than 1 charge. Again, it matches what we see in criminal justice, where you come in on multiple offenses, and 62% of them have an additional felony, and about almost 40% have an additional misdemeanor. Now, in terms of baseline, we asked a lot of questions at baseline, and we want to share with you a few things that caught our attention. These are percentages. So almost 1/3 are worried about losing their housing. Those are between 17 and 24 individuals. So there is a real concern about housing stability. In terms of not having housing at time of arrest, almost 1/4, 23%. Food stability is another concern. Almost 1/4 also worried about running out of food in the last 3 months, and in the next 3 months. And then whether their health impacted their social activities in the last 4 weeks, a staggering 60%. That's a big number. And whether they're depressed or anxious or downhearted, almost 70% actually mentioned that. And a recent health impact in the last 4 weeks, more than half of them mentioned. So this baseline suggests really that initially when we talked about many of them recidivate because the underlying factors are not being addressed, and you could see those underlying factors. You have housing stability concerns, you have food stability concerns, and you have a lot of other health related concerns that are definitely right there in the forefront. With that said, a quick update: we are still randomizing post as for a grant, and that's something we'll touch base on at the end of the presentation. We did stop the survey follow-up this past summer, and we are moving towards focusing on criminal justice outcomes only, specifically recidivism. And the last data download that we received last week will be able to start working on how is the treatment doing versus the control group. With that said, I'm going to go back to Emily, and she's going to mention more information about the process, Eva.
Right. So the other portion of the research project was the process evaluation. And this was all about documenting what's going on, what is working for the program, what was not working, how the program impacted participants kind of from the stakeholder perspectives itself, getting that kind of deeper understanding of what's going on beyond just the quantifiable data from the RCT. So we started this portion last summer, about 6 months after the launch of the RCT. And we started with interviewing all of the, what I call the program implementers, meaning the program staff, the case managers, our court judges and district attorneys, and program lawyers and other folks within the county. Then we also conducted a focus group with the participants themselves. And we got to observe kind of court proceedings and what's called the life skills course, where the participants will get together with the program staff and their case managers to talk about, kind of general ideas of what's impacting their life and how they can improve those skills. They also at some point usually get to the participants present a skill at Life Skills. And so when we were there, we got to see one participant share the soap that she was making and selling, and then another participant showed the rest of the team how to change a tire. So that was pretty cool. Phase 2, we just recently finished back in kind of summer of 2022. We focused again on talking to program staff and additional observations of the court. And so if you hadn't heard our presentations before, or maybe if you have and you had forgotten, what we learned last year in phase 1, I was just going to reiterate and kind of quickly summarize so everybody could be on the same page. But what we found was what is working best for the program are these particular services: this drug treatment, case management, job and education support, and life skills. But we also kind of really heard repeatedly over and over and over again how important it was to build a relationship between the program staff, these key stakeholders, and the participants themselves. Again, I feel like everyone on the team is super dedicated. Everyone builds an individual relationship with these participants and kind of builds that team relationship with the participants. Became obvious that the critical component was without these relationships, participants weren't necessarily as willing to maybe accept the services the program offered or really kind of change their thinking. So we often ask, we're like, is it the services or is it the relationships that have really kind of impacted participants? And what we heard repeatedly was that it was both, and that you couldn't have one without the other. You needed the services, you needed the drug treatment, the jobs and education support, the life skill support, but you also needed that key team who was willing to connect with participants and help them along the way while still asking them to be accountable. Communication was also key because, again, this is a large team. They all have other responsibilities as part of this team. And so the team was open about communicating a lot amongst themselves, really trying to problem solve it together as a collaborative effort. On the other hand, we found there were some challenges: transportation, housing services, and kind of a consistent access to counseling. There were also some concerns about matching services to the right needs of the participant, whether or not some participants would be potentially over-programmed, or whether or not they had a local service, a local community option that could address that participant's particular need. And then there was some concern over the small number of participants at the time, both how it impacted the study, but also kind of how it impacted the program. From the participants, and so a lot of that information came from mostly the program implementers, but from the participants, they echoed a lot of the same themes. They were very thankful for their supportive team, their supportive case managers. They gave a lot of examples about how they would call Mark at 3 a.m. and talk to him about whatever was on their mind and things like that. They noted that these relationships were critical to them. At one point, they did also note they felt some of the program requirements may be a little too difficult to always achieve, whether they felt they were meeting too often or just couldn't accept that because of their work schedules, or felt like they had to juggle a lot of it. That was That was pretty much their only complaint about the program at that point. But ultimately, most participants acknowledged that there were a change in their attitudes and behaviors because of the program, which is what that top quote there is illustrating. We also heard a variety of success stories from these participants. I think one of the ones that stuck with us the most at this first group was one participant spoke up and said, if it wasn't for this program, I would probably be dead right now. And so just this idea that they were able to kind of break out of some of the unhealthy habits that they had, get to the supports and services that they really needed, and kind of start working out of their way of making some of that change that they needed to make, as the kind of bottom quote illustrates. Participants also felt closer to their community and wanted to be more actively involved in making it better. And we just kind of in general heard this kind of back and forth between the program and the community and the program, and how they were accepting of each other and how they were trying, like both parts of the puzzle were kind of interacting and trying to bolster the lives of the participants. Okay, so that was all phase one. That was in 2021. In 2022, we wanted to dive down a little deeper into some of these things. So how has this program changed? It's now 18 months into the program when we're doing the second round of interviews. What does it look like to address the number of participants that were growing? How has the program had to evolve to address these new needs and what this population looks like? Was it able to overcome some of the service gaps and other challenges identified in the first phase? Is it still having an impact? And what does that impact look like? And really just kind of refocusing on some of these questions to document what is happening now as a more kind of mature program, right? And so what we found, I would classify as like changes in the participant population, changes in case management, and then changes in the requirements and the service. So as that lovely graph that George showed y'all emphasizes, there was quite a bit of growth in both the number of participants for our study and the number of participants for the program during this time. The participant number grew, but none of the staffing really changed at the program level. So as you guys can all imagine, now we're seeing an increased kind of workload, caseload for everyone at the program, right? From the case managers to the lawyers, to the program staff, but no extra time during the day, no extra necessary, resources and supports like that. And so it kind of begs the question, what else had to change or how did it evolve, right? Overall, everyone was very excited about the participant growth, all of the program implementers that we talked to, mainly because what was repeated to us was that it was like we finally got to see how this model was working, right? We finally got to test what we wanted to do when we built this model to begin with and get to really experiment and see how this potential program could change multiple people's lives. The population was also kind of changing a little bit in terms of demographics. We heard that it was younger, and with this, they may have the population had kind of different motivations, more focused on how a felony on their record would impact like going to college. The younger population was also said to kind of have maybe more stable housing because they still can live with their parents. Whereas the older younger adults were the ones that tended to bounce from home to home. So that was one kind of change in the population. But they also tended to have more severe drug charges by this point of the program that again seemed to be rooted in coping issues for increased stress or mental health kind of through, since we initially did the first phase. And so I think we see that the program staff had to learn how to address to these new motivators, right? We have different challenges, different needs, plus that in turn needs different services. Also, because the number of participants is larger, so were the case managers' caseloads. Although I think most of them reported back positively, or I think everyone reported back positively that this was actually great. As this quote here on the screen kind of illustrates, there was this kind of consensus that by having more participants, they actually felt they could, take a little step back and maybe not have to be as hands-on or give as much, maybe not hand-holding as much as needed to be. And as I like this quote suggest, putting the power back into the hands of the participant. still supporting them, still offering them the support they need, but allowing them to be more responsible for their own next steps and having them to be more accountable. Because as it says, at the end of the day, we need them to be independent and, you know, live life without us. So they still need to transition out of this. And then moreover, I think what we saw in turn was because of there's this greater participant caseload and more participant interaction, participants actually became to rely on each other. So we heard stories about how there were more potential peers to connect with. They could find others that they could kind of bond with that may not have been able to build those relationships amongst each other when they were a smaller group. And we heard stories about participants sharing rides that the case managers used to have to facilitate, or the older graduates, older peers kind of sharing their experiences with the younger peers and helping try to get that mentor role, or also just graduates wanting to stick around and still be a part of the program, is sharing their experiences and helping the younger ones. But to adapt to this growing population, the program had to make some shifts. We heard about offering more life skills times and less mandatory court if the participants were doing well, which I think kind of addressed some of those cumbersome, how the participants saw the requirements being kind of cumbersome. This allotted a little bit more flexibility, right? But we also had, the program staff had to find ways to increase participant buy-in. Some participants didn't take the program very seriously. So we heard stories about taking extra steps to explain the purpose to them of the program, explain to them how it's important to, you know, the severe downsides of having a felony on your record, how it can prohibit you from getting a home or job or getting into school. A few participants still not followed through on the tasks, and the program did implement what they call a strike system, where too many missed appointments or court dates and meeting program check-ins or requirements could potentially lead to strikes. I'll let them elaborate on that a little bit more if they want to. And if there were too many strikes, it is considered failing the program. At the time we had this discussion, I think it was just being implemented. They hadn't really gotten very far on any particular participant receiving too many strikes yet, but it actually did kind of have the needed effect of getting some participants back on track. Okay, and then finally, talking about kind of the services, we saw that in this later phase, they had started being able to find opportunities for housing services and more consistent mental health professionals and access to those professionals. I don't think there was a solution to transportation. That was still one of the resounding issues. But then I also like this quote here that brought up another potential opportunity, and that is the additional service of offering some kind of aftercare and focusing on, you know, what else may someone need after they're graduated from the program, after they receive their expunction. Is there anything that could be, you know, a way to support them in other ways, and what could that look like so that the underlying issues are just kind of more fully addressed? Okay, so another focus of our phase 2 was document again where we at on impact, how are participants feeling about the program, how are stakeholders feeling about the impact of the program on the community justice system. And in phase 1, we heard all these stories about the program saving lives and helping participants get treatment and helping them gain stability. But in this phase, we heard additional points about the program preventing participants from reoffending. Like we had a quote that said, because of the program, they were not necessarily reoffending. And we also heard a lot about how the program was impacting participants' confidence and motivation. Again, another quote to kind of illustrate some of my favorite points from everything we learned was that this is how they define success in the program, or some of the perspectives on how success should be defined in the program. They see it as any kind of growth. So reoffending is just one part, but a larger focus is on participants' individual growth. And so this could be growth in many ways. It could be growth in accountability, growth in control, growth in productivity, or even growth in healing from some of those initial traumas that have brought them to this point in the first place. And I also like this quote because it points out that the growth isn't necessarily linear. And so sometimes we see progress and then there's setbacks. but that overall they were very excited and focused on celebrating kind of any progress as a success. And then we also kind of revisited how the program was impacting the criminal justice system, again, both in Williamson County and also as a model to other counties and courts. These are just two examples. Basically, the attention related to the program seems to have grown over the in between the two time periods. I often say everyone on the program team is a walking billboard for this program. They all have stories on how they can found another community program that could offer them this service or obtained another financial contribution or just generally brought more attention to the program, really kind of being the spokespeople for this. But there's also been kind of various newspaper articles about it and just increased attention overall. To the extent as that left quote is showing that this is starting to be seen as a model to other courts, other criminal justice system processes as to what are different ways that we could go about this type of system. And then I like the quote on the right because it's really showing kind of the changing context and how this program is having to, stay the path while there's all this shift going on in the community behind it. And what it's highlighting is that the feedback we heard was there was increased violent crime in the community, but that they were still seeing an increased level of support for something like the Transformative Justice program, because it was helping people acknowledge that, yes, let's find a way to get these folks out of the system, and that way all of our resources for court, for trials and everything can be focused on some of these more serious offenders, these violent crimes in this increasing rates. And then finally, I included this quote because I liked that it kind of synthesizes the overall challenge of these types of programs. How we hear statistics like 75% or 85% of this population, this age range, is likely to recidivate. And so just from the very first moment, this becomes a formidable challenge, right? It's hard to make these serious shifts when it's such a large a number to overcome, something like this. And so this little quote highlights how, we are impacting some of these folks and we're keeping some of these folks safe and getting them out of the system. And we're proud of that. And this exemplifies what we're doing while also keeping the community safe. And that's a big portion of this program. And so to sum it up with phase 2, we reconfirmed a lot of the ideas that we heard in 1, right? That you need these people that are willing to build relationships, that are willing to work as a team, that are willing to connect their participants to services in the community and really go that extra mile of getting them the supports they need. But then phase 2 added some nice layer of additional things that I think are helpful to any program or county or community who wants to consider a program like this. And that's that the program needs to be flexible. We talked about how the population changed between phase 1 and phase 2 and how that generates changes in motivation, changes in service needs, and so on. And so the program stakeholders are constantly, these implementers are constantly coming up with creative solutions to address the challenges. And they were adamant that it can't be a one-size-fits-all care plan for each participant. It really needs to be adaptable to what's going on in the community, but also what are the individual's needs. They also talked about, again, the buy-in and kind of the commitment to the process. Kind of additionally, and I didn't mention this before, but because I could have gone on quite a few more slides about this, but additionally, the program needs to consider whether participant family members are an asset or a distraction. And so I put these two quotes here to highlight the dichotomy between what we heard on some of the experiences. In some cases, the family is a critical support for participants, as that top quote kind of highlights and talks about. We heard all of these success stories and we even saw it in court, where family would come with the participant and really support them through the process and through changing their lives. In other cases, the family was almost a barrier, or at least made it more challenging to really impact change in the participant's life, as that kind of bottom quote highlights. they may be encouraging some of the negative behaviors. And so it's similar to like how the care plan has to be really flexible. Also, we have to be really flexible on how to incorporate the family. In some cases, again, it's critical, it's needed. You have that extra support as part of the program team, but in other cases, it may be more of a deterrent. And then the final piece that we noticed was that programs like this need a lot of community services and resources and connections. And so there needs to be some system on hand on how to manage all of that. I think as it stands now, it feels like every person has a hand in it. So what else, but they all expressed a desire on like wishing they could do more, wishing they had this additional connection, wishing they had a way to broadcast more what the program was doing. So I think some kind of system in place to really kind of handle that infrastructure of how do we connect the services that are in the community to us and us to everybody else in the community is something that needs to be considered for anybody who wants to tackle a program like this.
And just a quick three main takeaways that we want to highlight. Such programs need extended time to be evaluated. And the reason is because the outcomes are such multi-dimensional. I know I said it at the beginning, we are getting towards more focusing on criminal justice outcomes in the next third phase of the study. But there are so many other much more complicated outcomes that we as researchers need to look at. And something to also think about is that we need creative ways to be able to collect data, whether it's through survey or through administrative data, data and basically, agreements with different data agencies. With that said, I'm going to not mention these next steps. I would like to open the floor for our commentators, Terrence Davis and Mark Ruiz, so they can first introduce themselves and comment on the program and the study and answer any questions that the audience may have.
Or correct anything we got wrong.
Or correct anything we mentioned.
We explained terribly.
Mark, I'll let you go first because I know you have to go to another meeting, so I don't have any time constraints. So I'll let you answer anything you want to say, Mark, and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Terrence. Good morning, everybody. Yes, my name is Mark Ruiz. I'm one of the case managers / juvenile probation officer that I was moved from my probation officer position to this just because I have a good rapport and get along well with families and so forth. I'll be celebrating my 21st year as a probation officer, case manager, and on January 1st. So I've been doing this for a while, and thankfully, I have a 2-year countdown where I'll be eligible to retire. So I get to be a rock star after that and pursue my music career. But anyway, yes, I love working with this group of kids. I was really burnt out with the juvenile world. But now working with the 17, 24-year-olds, it's been amazing in dealing with this population and giving those opportunities. I've been blessed to be able to become a TBRI, trust-based relational intervention practitioner. Just because, when you come from a field of juveniles and so forth, it's more punitive. And here you get to be yourself because, I like to say I'm a pretty laid back, cool person, and giving these kids opportunities to be themselves as well, and learning a lot from my past and being able to share that with them to make better choices. Because, we're no matter what age you are, we're always making mistakes, and we're always being punished for our mistakes and so forth. But in this program, it's like we're able to look past that, because we want to connect. One of the things that's TBRI is about connecting, empowering, and correcting. And I like to be in the connecting and the empowering, because the more we're in those two phases, the correcting is much less. And in the old model, it's always correcting, and that gets old, and it gets taxing. So being able to connect and empower these individuals is so much more fun, because we get to do a lot of fun activities with them. When we do life skills group, it's weekly. Somebody asked a question about what we use for curriculum, and the curriculum is really we use curriculums as a soft tool, But a lot of times with me, when I do the curriculum, because I was doing it weekly for the past 3 years until we got the new case managers early last year, so they've been able to help. But a lot of times I would just come up with ideas of something of one of the individuals was dealing with. I was able to utilize that, and come up with our own life skills group to address that for that individual. And a lot of the individuals were able to adjust to that, and like, yeah, I've been through that issue before. And so it's a lot of, I do it some talking, but it's a lot of just interaction where everybody's doing a lot of talking and just sharing. And that's the cool thing about the life skills group is it's like there's no it's very open. There's no wrong answer. You're not going to be excommunicated if you tell me something I don't like. It's open. And one of the things I'll have to stress, I guess I'm talking a little bit faster because I know my time is short. But one of the main things that I address the most to my participants every week or when or in group is, and we forget about this, it's about just showing that you care and you love. It's all about loving that individual and showing that, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. We're here for you. So one of the things I like to stress, because I had a hard time with my emotions and feelings at their age, and now that I've progressed through therapy and so forth, and being a practitioner and so forth, it's like it's okay to say, hey, we love you, and you're going to be successful, and we want to help you, and we're not going to do it for you, because we can't want it more than these participants, right? So it's those little things like that where I feel like this program succeeds because we're all on the same page. We got two contracted attorneys, we got the judge, we got DA, we got Terrence, who's an awesome program director. We got the research team, and it's all about we all care. And when you have care and love, man, it comes a long way. And one of the things we stress in today's society and the way we live, it's very difficult because there's all we see is we see a lot of negativity. So we stress those type of things, and just to get them on the right track. And I apologize, I have to leave. But to Terrence, he knows I like to speak from the heart. He's more of the nuts and bolts, and because he's an attorney, he's a little bit more proficient in that way. But we also have a video too. We had a couple of participants that give a couple of testimonies. So you'll get a chance to see that, and you'll really enjoy it as well. But thank you for giving me the time to be a part of this. I'm sorry I have to leave. But with that note, Terrence, take it away, sir.
All right, thanks a lot, Mark. Appreciate you coming and joining this and being a part of the program. So my name is Terrence Davis. I'm the program director for the Transformative Justice program here in Williamson County. And it's almost 2 years now, I guess, that I've been the program director almost. And it's just been a privilege to work with the research group and just this whole program, the idea of trying to do something smarter and something that works better than the normal system. When you do something for 100 years and realize one day that it doesn't work and that you need to do something different, that's where we're at. We're just trying to figure out how to best do it. We know you can't make it worse, basically. So we have to be able to make it better. And I think that the research team is showing some of those results. We're seeing them on the ground. And so I'd love to answer any of these questions. I don't know how y'all want to do the questions that are typed in here, but y'all just tell me what to answer and I'll answer it. Let's put it that way.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. This has been a great tour through the research around this program, and we do have some interesting questions submitted by our audience. So I can help to moderate. I will take a little bit of moderator's privilege and step through some of these, but let me invite any of the other panelists. If you see questions you want to jump to and answer, you can also go ahead and do that. But we had a couple of questions early on about the data shared about social activities that program participants were experiencing disruptions in social activities that are impacted by health, and some questions related to that about whether we know anything about disability status of some of the participants served. And I think that could be physical disability or intellectual or developmental disability. So just a question to any of the panelists: what do we know about the intersection of your program participants with issues around disability?
I can tell you, boots on the ground, that we have several people that have intellectual disabilities for sure. I would say probably about 15% of them have some sort of intellectual disability. Some are different levels. And as far as I almost feel like it's almost, I mean, it's sad. It's some of the people, they graduated high school and you don't even realize how they could have done it. And what their comprehension is, and it is a direct connection to their criminal behavior, their choices, their impulsivity. And I think that their parents in a couple of the situations did try and seek the help of the government in different educational settings and whatnot. And then some just let their kids skate through and never really addressed any of it. And they got a person who can't really work or do other things because of their intellectual disabilities. And some of them are true, fully intellectual disabilities. Some are just degradation because they haven't really polished or tried on some of them. I'll let the research team maybe answer some of the social health impacted activities. I think that might be a better question for them, but hopefully I answered the other question.
The only thing I'm going to just jump in about learning disabilities is that this is something when we work on criminal justice, we see more and more often than something that definitely needs to be studied. Terrence mentioned about 15%, and that's a big number. But there's still a lot of information that we do not know. We don't know if the jail and the criminal justice system is equipped to deal with them, what services they can offer them in general. And level of comprehension to their actions and to basically the system in the next steps, and that's something we hope to actually study further in the future.
I think if I just want to add something, the biggest challenge for us is we have an individualized case plan, and so we try and make a plan for them. But it's hard to be, anytime there's a group setting with someone that has intellectual disability, sometimes you're trying to be consistent, but also individualized. And so sometimes those inhibit what consequences you can give because they don't comprehend always everything that you're trying to do. And so trying to figure out how to best do that is a challenge. So I appreciate the question. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Another question came in and asked about if you could talk more about the recruitment challenges experienced during the program. What really was driving that? Is it these issues about fewer arrests than you expected, or fewer eligible people, fewer people who are eligible but agreeing to participate in the program? What were some of the major drivers there?
I'm going to just jump in, Terrence, and then you can actually add to comments. I think the main reason was fewer arrests, and it wasn't really eligibility and it wasn't really agreement. And I think Terrence can mention, because can talk about the agreeing to join the program. It was really fewer arrests, and that drop we see, and we have the data prior to November 2021, and we should have actually shared that. You could see a significant drop in arrests, and we don't know if this is really because of the pandemic per se, or is it because of slowly the criminal justice moving away. Most of the offenses are drug related, moving away from drugs. But I'm going to let Terrence basically also complement my answer.
I think it's twofold. I think it's definitely directed to the number of arrests. I don't think it's eligibility. I think that the people that we speak with, so how the process works, unless some people may not know, basically someone gets arrested, there's qualification material that the district attorney's office is aware of, and then they just email us and say, someone meeting that criteria that is eligible for the program is in the jail. And then we go meet them in the jail, talk to them. 98% probably say, yes, I'd love to do that program. Who wouldn't? Basically. And once we tell them that, there'll be a couple that'll, either be out of it or are skeptical of who we are and why it's too good to be true, because it really is too good to be true, the program that we offer. And so I could see myself being kind of like, well, I don't know. And so I think that that's not an issue in terms of people agreeing to be part of the program. That's not a thing. But I also think that the sort of it around the country in general, and especially in the Austin area, kind of a decriminalization of marijuana and THC oil is a big impact, I think, on some of the arrests in conjunction with the pandemic. Of course, I think the pandemic by far was the most impactful during that period of time. And then afterwards, I think it's been a little bit of, well, what about, that? So most of our arrests, I think, have been in the Williamson County area that are THC oil based, where kids are taking THC oil to school, which is a felony to have the drugs on campus. Whereas if they would have had that maybe, off campus, it would not even have resulted in the same effect. And that's why there's also a younger population, is if there's arrests in the high schools, obviously they're younger than 23, 22. So hopefully that answers that question.
Fantastic. I want to get to at least one more question. Let's skip down the list here a little bit. What do we know about in terms of this population being served, their exposures to interpersonal violence or domestic violence? Is that an issue in this population, and are some of the services designed to address that issue? That also, I think, brings in the issues of adverse childhood experiences in general, and what we know about those issues. Any comments there?
Could you re-say that question?
Sure. Yeah. Do we know of the population being served by that program, how many of them are coming from homes with interpersonal violence or domestic violence? Those are issues that need to be addressed as part of the response.
I would probably say, if at a low number, would be 65%, 70% have domestic violence in their direct past or at home. So either their significant others, a lot of them have very problematic relationships, but some of these I feel are kind of like related. They're generational problems. There's also drug related problems. When you have drug problems, you have money problems. When you have money problems, you have fights. And then when your parents emulate that behavior, it kind of seems like normal. So there were some that are supportive families that don't have that dysfunction, but a lot of them either have that dysfunction and family violence in their current relationships or with their immediate family members, there being their parents. One will be in jail, or one had prior history, if that answers your question.
Fantastic. Absolutely. This has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you all so much. Unfortunately, we're at the bottom of the hour here. I'll say, for any of our attendees, if you want to learn more, we didn't get to your questions today, feel free to send us an email to the Systems for Action program, and we can help connect you to the research team or to other resources to get other questions asked. Thank you so much, George, Emily, Terrence. Phenomenal work. We look forward to continuing to learn from your work in this space, and we'll keep everybody updated, and invite everybody as well to join us for our next Systems for Action Research in Progress webinar series. So thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. So long.
Thank you.
Thank you.